Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you're at around the world. Welcome to our first edition of the movie review of Beyond Hip Hop. Now, I went through a lot trying to get the producer of this movie to release it, to have it be seen here exclusively for Locker Legends members. And I'm not going to hold you up. I wanted to do a couple of things before we start this movie, and we're going to let it run all the way through. As you've seen in the beginning right there, the Soul Train and all the dancing of locking around the world. You know, my goal as an activist is to one day present the culture from the inner streets of South Central Los Angeles, the real culture of the street dance and what it meant in that particular time. That's not this movie. This movie was brought to me because of the international scene of locking and the confusion that they had. So this is not a documentary on the inner city history and some of the remarkable things that took place. This is a documentary on the terminology that was being confused around the world. And there's a brief rendition. That's why I was asked to narrate this movie. The producer, Ricky Carenza, will be on at the end, and we will do a quick panel. It's a lengthy movie, so I hope you guys can hang on throughout the movie so that you can see and talk about what went on during those particular times. But first, I have to do this because this movie is an exclusive movie and is still being presented around the world to various film festivals and things of that sort. And like I said, we went through a lot to get it released here. So I want to give you a disclaimer. This is an exclusive presentation, and all copyrights are the property of Ricky Carenza and Fuse, his production company, and shall not be reproduced or redistributed around the internet without his written permission. We all know what happens on the internet, and we try to bring you these things free some types of way. You know, I have a medical situation that's taking place out of state, but I promised to bring you this movie. So I'm here to take care of this. So now, stay on. We're going to present Beyond Hip Hop. Can everyone hear me out there? I am trying to get the sound back up. If you can hear me on this, could somebody please send me a thumbs up on the messages? Because I'm not able to see. I'm getting sound on this end. Can you hear me?
Street dance culture in the Philippines and its impact all around the world. I have seen the amount of time and work Ricky put into that. The project, the beginning to the end. Ricky visited more than 10 countries, interviewed more than 50 dancers. The amount of information amassed obviously would not fit in this one film.
Is there anyone out there that hears sound at all? Okay, how many of out there want me to start the film over again?
As accurate as possible. And that's what I would like and intend to do as well. I'm not an expert on all the dance styles.
Does anyone out there want me to start the film over again? Or is this fine? Okay, let's see.
World Hip Hop. So, and what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to teach other people what hip hop is. And what was that called again?
The entire world has been exposed to a phenomenon they can't explain. They don't know if it's a dance, a sound, a style, or actually if it's any of those things. The question is, what do we call it? Is the proper term hip hop? Do we use that or the term street dance for the style of dances that you see done today? Is it right to call every dance hip hop? Or is that just an umbrella term of a distinct culture? To the general commercially exposed public, they may all mean the same. So it may not even matter to them. But to the dancer who professes this as lifestyle, they should know the lifestyle they are professing. They should know better. Today, the vibrant dance culture is massive, with enormous amounts of money-making opportunities, something that was not always in its history. In today's time, it has evolved into a huge business, with competitions all over the world, today's dancers have actual chance to make a living. But just as all innocent things transform into the world of money, there becomes confusion, politics. Yes, the popularity is increasing, but the knowledge and understanding is decreasing. Balance is what must be kept for the dancer's personal growth and career, but most of all, for the preservation of the culture itself. It's time to look closely for the welfare of everyone. The key word to that is culture. And where does that come from? To explore that, we must go back before all of this existed. We must explore the inspirations outside of the technical aspects of the dance, music, and the poetry of what today is considered the hip-hop culture. My name is James Higgins, born January 21st, 1955. I go back to that era that preceded any existence of the dances we are about to explore. I am a dancer by heart, not by profession. From when and where I come from, no profession for what I was becoming ever existed, but it was evolving. The culture I came from proudly dubbed me a locker. They call me Skeeter Rabbit. This is Ricky Carranza, the director beside me. I've known him since 2004. We bonded on the street code of integrity. I'm giving him a tour of the many of the places where we cultivated this dance culture. The places we hung out, places where we built, created, and tell the message in our dance. For me, this is memory lane.
Take those right here and sit right out in the corner. That was the city. That was the city girl. The first place I ever been to take my child.
In his first award-winning documentary film, Beyond the Block, Ricky recounted his professional story in parallel with this development of street dance culture in the Philippines and its impact all around the world. I have seen the amount of time and work Ricky put into that. The project, the beginning to the end. Ricky visited more than 10 countries, interviewed more than 50 dancers. The amount of information amassed obviously would not fit in this one film. This is a sequel to that documentary. But this film is no longer about Ricky's personal biography. It concerns the life of every dancer who loves hip-hop and or street dance. For this reason, he asked me to do this narration. He said that he wanted to make this film as universal, neutral, and as historically accurate as possible. And that's what I would like and intend to do as well. I am not an expert on all the dance styles, but I have lived the chronological order from their inception to what they have become today. and I will attempt to share that insight. We will attempt to define and trace the origin of the different styles, show where they overlap and where they separate. Check if they are correctly placed in their proper categories, street or hip hop.
Hip hop is what? DJing, rapping, MCing, graffiti, and dance.
Hip hop is a culture that started from New York.
It's a lifestyle. It's a culture.
Hip hop needs to be hip hop. I think hip hop is a feeling. Just free, I suppose. Hip hop to me is just being free and not so isolated, I suppose.
It's a culture talaga na walang pinipili.
Hip hop in its purest form is the ciphers.
James Brown. JB, I'm all about JB.
Hip hop doesn't necessarily have to be with like
To hip hop music.
music. I guess it kind of depends on what you define.
But you do it to hip hop music because that's what hip hop is.
To me, what hip hop is, I don't really want to say because I wasn't there. I'm not somebody who should be saying what hip hop is.
According to this description, hip hop is an element of the hip hop culture. The cipher, raw, every street dance style being free, freedom of expression.
It's something raw about the street, right? We are literally just going out and just putting yourself on the line.
Street dance is that raw.
Street dance is langgani sa kalye. Done in the street, literally. Street dance is another umbrella in its own that doesn't only include hip hop, I think.
Street dance, raw, very free.
I think street dance is really derived from like raw form of expression from the music.
Let's sum up what we've heard. Street dance is raw, not isolated, done in the street, being free, or freedom of expression. The definition is basically identical. Are they the same? No, they are not. They have different points of origin. Each has its own unique culture. Each has its own world. And the only way to see clearly the distinct but overlapping boundaries is to ask the question, which came first?
Is street dance, and then hip hop is in that.
Which came first, street dance or hip hop? So music is always first for me. There is no dance without music. Well, I'm gonna see hip hop as the music, and hip hop comes before the street dance.
Everything comes from something.
I don't know. I don't know. For me, with like hip hop, I feel like I don't know. It might be just those original styles first, and then everything kind of moves.
I think street dance. Tapos yung hip hop under lang. Yung hip hop under ng street dance. Under its umbrella. Everything that is street dance, they call it hip hop.
But if we say hip hop attaches to an even bigger umbrella. Cultural understanding of music, of dance, of party, of people, of so many different things.
Whether hip hop came first or street dance came first, listen, the word dance is much older than the word hip hop.
So I understand it in my way because yes, on the bottom. So for example, you got locking, you got popping, you got breaking, you got pumping, you got jerking, you got everything, right? So I would say the umbrella would be street hip hop.
I don't know. It's a tricky one.
Wala pang word na hip hop akong naririnig ng araw.
I'd say street dance. It's the umbrella of hip hop.
I disagree.
If we just say street dance, then our information is limited at the umbrella of street dance.
Well, I'm going to see hip hop as the music, and hip hop comes before the street dance.
That's my thing. I think street dance came first.
The music first, and then that's the street dance. You know, let's go back to the old school ways of hip hop.
I would say street dance because street dance is it's freestyling.
Which came first, street dance or hip hop?
Street dance. Come on, street dance. Yeah, right. No, that's a no-brainer.
I didn't even know what hip hop was. It didn't exist. They didn't even really say street dancing. It was like club dancing or party dancing, soul dancing, funky steps. Street dance, I just heard word once in a while when I started going to the clubs.
You only hear soul. There was James Brown talking about soul. The music people soul. Don Cornelius talking about soul. That's all I heard. I didn't hear anything about hip hop.
But somehow I understood it. Sorry, girls.
Yeah, I've just realized the contradiction that I've mentioned in terms of hip hop and hip hop as the umbrella or street dance as the umbrella.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you say it like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Street dance is the bigger umbrella of many different genres. Could be whatever.
If we're technically speaking, then I would say street dance. Because people have been dancing on the street forever.
Can you now see where the confusion comes in? If a person is not rooted in history and not informed of the different elements inside each respective area, it is so easy to get confused. If the dancers themselves are confused, imagine the common people who are non-dancers. The new generation needs to be educated, but who will educate them? Who are the credible authority for this unique art form? Obviously, the dancers themselves who were there from the beginning, who saw the birth and growth of this culture. And trust me when I say I have no selfish motivation and hidden agenda in this. I just want to tell the story from my point of view. I am too old for these dance politics, and I am beyond the business aspect of this dance. I don't earn from this dance, and I do not intend to. There was a point that I almost did, but I'm glad I got out in time. To understand this vast and intricate culture better, it is important to elaborate and get to the core of this, layer after layer. Let's start with the list and the general definition that the world has been exposed to of the various styles. These are the styles which are considered street and hip hop, which are often seen in dance competitions worldwide. Locking, a dance style which originated in the African American communities of Los Angeles, California at the turn of the 1970s decade. The distinguishing moves are the lock, the wrist roll, and the point, all done in a unique improvisational rhythm created by Don Campbell, who is the known originator of the style. But as in all these dances, locking became a fusion of past and newly developed moves and steps. The inspiration of the music at the time coming out of the 1960s into the 1970s was soul and funk, and that led later into early disco of the late 1970s. Today, the style of dance is often included in hip-hop dance competitions. But take note, locking originated on the west coast of Southern California, not in New York, the birthplace of hip-hop. So do you think this is hip-hop? Popping, a dance style which originated in California, also focused on the contraction of the muscles of different parts of the body, also known as the pop. For example, the arms, chest, neck, abdominals, and the hyperextension of the knee articulation on the beat or on the rhythm. Its evolution coming from different styles in it. Boogaloo, strutting, waving, robot, animation, and more. The creation's origin is disputed, with the world mostly knows its popularity coming from a dancer by the name of Boogaloo Sam, who created what is now known as the Boogaloo style of popping. Is this hip hop? b-boying, now developing in the mid to the late 70s on the East Coast. The origins of creations are again disputed, but the world knows the term b-boy as short for Bronx boy, leading its history on the East Coast through the Bronx of New York. This dance has a group of style collaborations through the footwork of uprocking into the floor moves of capoeira. The confusion is whether the b-boy is a culture of dance and dances from the hip-hop movement and breaking is the actual style. Or is it that b-boying itself is a style of dance? We do know that two of the most famous crews to expand its popularity were the Rocksteady crew and the New York City Breakers. Its origin in the late 70s from the East Coast leaves no doubt of why this style is referred to as hip-hop. And the term breaker at the end of the name New York City Breakers leave no doubt that the term breaking is associated with the b-boy culture. Whacking, a dance style that also developed on the West Coast during the same era as locking development. Its popularity was sped up on the Soul Train TV show, right along with locking. However, its origins came from the parties of the gay clubs and the gay community, which entailed elaborate arm movements, extreme attitude, and modeling-like poses. The popularity are attributed to a lot of early Soul Train dancers, with the most popular being a dancer by the name of Tyrone Proctor. This dance style also has a unique path of evolution in today's hip-hop scene. But is it hip-hop? Crumping, another West Coast innovation. But the point to pay attention to is crumping developed in the much later era of the 2000s, an era after the initial development of hip-hop and all of the other dances. It is highly aggressive and emotionally explosive dance that developed on a competitive confrontational scene. It mixed different elements of fraternity stomp dances, popping, clowning, and more. The controversy of origin exists also with this style's history between clowning and its originator Tommy the Clown and crumping icons Tight Eyes Willis and Big Mijo Ratty, who were both originally clown dancers. Can a dance developed after hip-hop and away from New York be called hip-hop? House dancing, a very smooth footwork style dance, emerged in the clubs of New York and Chicago in the 1980s, which from the best of history disputes cannot be defined by a single place of origin or person. The intricacies of its footwork is remarkable to the constant African style house beats. Although we cannot place this with one original creator, we can place the many dancers who the world now sees as icons, such as Khalid Sellers, Brian Green, E. Joe Wilson, and Brooklyn Terry Wright. Just as in all controversy, we know there are many dancers out there with claims to credit with its origins, and probably rightly so. But again, coming from both the Midwest, Chicago, and New York, the question is, can we call this hip-hop? Voguing, a dance style which emerged in the 1980s in New York. Madonna's song called Vogue made it a global sensation in the 90s. But the history goes back further, 2 decades prior, in Harlem among African American drag queens. This unique glamorous style focuses on mimicking fashion models as they pose for camera for Vogue magazines with intricate arm and body movements. It was more of a satire presentation back then. But over the years, this unique dance developed into a more artistic and acrobatic style with different emphasis on the old way or the new film way. Is this hip hop? In the late 80s and early 90s, there was a new dance which was becoming popular in the clubs of the East Coast. It came out of a new genre of music, which hip-hop artists were using at a particular period. The music genre is called the New Jack Swing. It is upbeat with thumping bass and captivating rhythm. The dancers, of course, will follow. The dance which came out of this was eventually labeled hip-hop. Over the years, the old concept of hip-hop dance, which was the fusion styles of b-boying, was superseded by this style. The media promoted it as hip-hop dance. For this reason, whenever hip-hop dance is mentioned, particularly in the 90s up to about 2 decades later, the world thinks of this style. Nowadays, hip-hop dance means anything that looks street. Basically, the words street dance and hip-hop have become synonymous. The general public eventually defines hip-hop dance as street dance. Urban choreography. Take note of the word category, because this is not a dance style. Technically speaking, a dance style means a particular and unique technique that makes it what it is and different from others. Choreography, on the other hand, means the putting of dance steps, routine, or movement together. It comes from the 2 ancient Greek words, chorea, which means a circular dance, and grapha, which means writing. Technically, choreography means dance writing. Urban choreography is basically a writing of various street style dances, but not necessarily on hip hop music. This is what makes people confused. Suddenly, any kind of music is okay. Pop, jazz, house, anything. The dance is street style, but hip hop music no longer is needed. Keone and Mari Madrid are champions of this dance genre. This is present trend of the dance of the millennium. Whenever hip hop dance is the subject, this is what the new generation thinks of.
I feel like urban is a good word, just because it is street dance foundation, but it's also inspired by so many things, and it's not just in street dance, but it's also in jazz or in contemporary or in other styles like capoeira, or like we're continuously inspired by dance.
I think that we keep continually crossing over and blending, and it's like the lyricism, smoother kind of movement has become embraced by the hip hop, where they want to combine the percussive staccato kind of movement with the smoother movement that comes more from lyrical styles of dance.
So it's hard to, say that it's one thing, but the foundation of it definitely derives from hip hop. Urban street dance definitely comes from there, but it just evolves into another place because we just love dance in general, and we don't want to restrict ourselves to one thing.
Yeah, and also at the same time, we also respect hip hop so much and where it came from. So we know that what we're doing is not the same thing. It's something new. It's something new. It's like a little branch that came off the tree, but we don't know. We don't have a name.
For me, lyrical means flowing like a stream of water. And whereas there's other people who define lyrical as having to do with lyrics, actual lyrics from a song. And so I think there's a bit of a conflict that right there, because what I'm seeing is lyrical movement coming into the hip hop frame of reference. But what it is it's not so much about the words or anything. It's more about a smoother, watery flow to the movement.
Maybe you a stone cold killer. You've been knocking fellas off for the pillar. 1 minute got to talking about commitment. Then you say you.
In fairness to this category, however, there's actually a style which is evident and steadily emerging from it.
I thought it was love, I was sadly mistaken.
Look at how it's done.
This could be murder.
It's contemporary-ish, choppy style. Looks like a mixture of contemporary dance and various street style, but has that sporadic style. Check it.
We ain't getting no sleep. We ain't getting no sleep tonight. I already knew that once we started.
Slow, fast. That's the distinguishing style of this dance genre.
We ain't getting no sleep tonight. We ain't getting no sleep tonight.
tell us back in the days, was it ever called hip hop during your time?
The word hip hop didn't exist during my time. My time goes back into the 1960s and 70s before there was ever a term or a word or anything that related to the term hip hop. It didn't exist.
So when was the first time that you heard of a hip hop term?
The first time I ever heard of the hip hop term was somewhere in the 1980s.
There was no hip hop culture in Los Angeles.
No hip hop culture in Los Angeles. There was a culture in Los Angeles, but it wasn't called hip hop.
So it's amazing how they can be the same, but at the same time different.
But if you're talking about what causes these street cultures to be that way, they were the same. It was poverty. It was racial inequalities. It was police brutality. These are the things that was in the streets that would inspire people to make music that had social messages and inspire people to dance with creativity because no one could afford, there was no such thing as dance studios in the inner cities. These are the same thing that was happening in every city across the United States. When hip hop first took off, it too was not just styles. It was a movement. It was a movement of people on the East Coast that was experiencing a decade later the same things that were being experienced in the 1960s and the early 1970s in the funk and soul era movement. Things that were taking place that was making their music a movement. And again, it became raw. What came out of that were dances that were raw. But those dances had influence from a movement before because they related to each other. They were relatives of each other. They were cousins of each other. Every old school B-boy that you talk to will give some credit to his starting out being with locking and popping. And the history of the early talks on the East Coast also explained to you that there were guys that called themselves boogie dancers. Well, what was boogie dancers? They were poppers that had seen the electric boogaloos, who was once known as the electronic boogaloo rockers. And I'm connecting the points all along.
What about the music?
If you use hip hop music with hip hop dancers, then you develop the hip hop culture. If you use ballet music with hip hop style of dancing, what are you developing? You're developing ballet. I have no problem with putting on a show with various music, but you allow people to understand that that's a cabaret show. You allow people to understand that this is a spoof on Casey at the Bat. So when Bombada says that it has to be funky, then he's saying it has to have that element emanating from the soul of the music to create that sound.
Yeah, he said it doesn't matter what kind of music. He said reggae, calypso, whatever it is, for as long as it's funky and has that heavy beat, he said, then you can make it hip hop. That's his definition.
If you look at the history going back into the continent that existed, Africa, years ago, you look at communication was done through what, Ricky? Drums. Going into the Native Americans, it was drums that talked to people and talked to their spirit.
That's why Africa Bambaataa said, for as long as it's funky and have that heavy
beats. Because that's the language that speaks internationally to people.
The secret ingredients of hip hop.
Okay, now let's add a term to hip hop to make it real.
Yes.
To make hip hop, to make it real.
So you're saying for a hip hop event to be legitimately called hip hop, they should use hip hop music, right?
For a hip hop event to basically be called hip hop, they should be promoting the elements of hip hop. And the elements of hip hop, where's the graph writing? Where is the competition between the DJs? Where is the young writer and the young wordsmith's ability to spit and rap to each other and positiveness? Where is the educational classes? Where are your OGs that have lived it, that sit down? So if you want to put your money where your banner is, invest in what's real.
Addict.
Is this Jay Higgins, original Skeeter Rabbit, Soul Brothers?
Our goal is to educate before we recreate. And it's time for that to happen. The truth. Did hip hop destroy street dance? Absolutely not. On the contrary, hip hop gave street dance a solid platform and relevance to a new generation. Hip hop gave street dance a new set of clothes. Hip hop brought glamour and prestige to a culture that has an innately negative undertone. Does this give hip hop the license to overshadow street dance? Overshadow? No. Association? Yes. Is it correct then to consolidate the two into one? Consolidation is good, but respect is another subject. Is it okay then to call all street dances hip hop because of this? If hip hop music is used, absolutely, as long as it has the street feel and culture, it is accepted as hip hop. Irrespective of the semantic conflict and all of the politics, at the end of the day, I know that the dancers and the essence of the dance will always find a way.
The blueprint for hip hop was established back in the 70s with Don Campbell and the Pop Lock and the Locket. We had Soul Train, we had the dancers, we had the long socks, we had the hats, and even me in the 11th grade, I wanted to be a locker. And that's what we did. And it wasn't until about 6 years later, we actually get the term hip hop. But all the elements were already established.
So I remember when the term hip hop came out. You know, I remember when Bam said it in an interview, and then people went, hip hop? That's what it's called? But before that, I'm from the West Coast, so I'm of a funk era. And before that, not to be too preachy, I'll just say that everything comes from something.
Okay, audio rolling. Skip trial, please.
Test.
Okay, good. We're all set. Okay, couple number one. Skip in the house. Finishing the document.
Hi, everybody. It's Fluky Luke. Ricky's done it again. Before you even one of you producers even think about it, you better call me because he's the only one thinking about me, and I'm wondering what's going on.
First of all, being a girl and doing street dancing, when they had auditions, they called it pop locking. So I was a pop locker. Then they didn't really do popping and locking. They just called it pop locking because that was what the society ended up calling us first. Then I was a break dancer. So when I went to auditions, I literally had to ask them, do you want an actual break dancer that does stuff on the floor, or are you looking for somebody that does like funky steps and street dancing and stuff? And they would tell me.
And that affects the dance, man. All that affects the dance because hip hop is one. So if the music is off, the dance is going to be off. It's going to affect the other one, man.
And camera one roll. Okay. Chin Rabbit Club number 7. Oh, we're going forward. Okay. Yeah. He's a superstar, man. Come on.
Actually, when I was dancing, we were always called street dancers, but I never asked, what is a street dancer? It came along after I learned how to dance. Then I would ask some people because of the way that they were treating street dancers. And I knew I was a street dancer, but I never did ask the question, why do they call us street dancers?
Wow. No. I think that was a powerful, powerful film, and we addressed it from a situation. I was hoping to have the co-producer, Ricky Carenza, on here with me so we could hold somewhat of a panel afterwards. But I'm here to answer questions that you type in. If there's any questions that you have that you want to type in. And I want to say something real quick after this. I want to tell you that there are so many people out there that aren't in this film. And there are stories out there that are prior to this thing ever really existing. There's so many dancers out there. That's the story that I really want to tell about the real inner streets and the dancers that dance for zero. The shows that were put together for zero, and some of the names and people out there that exist. These are some of the people that got famous that would make a good film. And Ricky did a great job in putting that together. But that's the story I want to tell, the effect, the socialist effect. That leads me to this. That leads me to the conversation of what is hip hop. Hip hop is a movement. It's not a style, a look, a fashion, or a sound. Those are all elements of the movement. Hip hop is a movement of a message from social issues that existed inside of the streets of the community. There's street dance. Street dance is the message from the streets of the communities that produced it. Not that it's done on the street, not that it's from anything other than that. The message from those streets of Harlem and Bronx and Compton and Watts and South Central LA are the messages that were told from nothing, from what is street dance. That's how the confusion of terminology. The confusion when I say the word movement, many international students are going to go to the movement of the dance steps. I'm talking about the social movement, the inspiration, the poverty, the stress, the ability to have a party with 2 records, to have the lyrics that talk about the issues of social injustice that you got to illustrate and dance. That's where these movements came from. And that's what's the power of street dance that is inside of hip hop. And it's collaborating. I think that's the power that attracts people around the world. That's the power around the world where everybody can relate to the struggles are attracted to street dance. One of these days, I'm going to put that film together on the inner city of South Central Los Angeles and what it inspired and what it meant coming out of the schools, coming from Don Campbell and Manual Arts High School in South Central through South Central Los Angeles to develop the groups, the steps, the styles, the fashion. One of these days, I've been pushing for a producer or investments to do that. One of these days, it's going to be put together so that documentary will always exist. If I can ever show this again, because I know there was some problems in the beginning, and I know we didn't have Ricky on, I'm going to be glad to do it. Are there any questions out there that any of you got that I can answer for you in this from this video? I have a lot of Mike Rivera. Hey, I really appreciate you, man. What you do in Culture Shock, what you've done in Culture Shock to keep live dancing, to keep people having a place to go, man, is admirable. There are a lot of people out there that deserve credit. Midnight deserves credit for what he gives back to the community. Asia One out here on the West Coast deserves credit. I can't mention all of you out there. There's a lot of you. My sister Flo Jenkins from ex-editor of Right On Magazine, Thelma Davis, all these people. But I got old schoolers that I'm really loyal to. My Go-Go Brothers I'm loyal to. And there are other old schoolers that I know that deserves credit for a movie like this and for this thing going around the world. Without them, it wouldn't exist. Without Netterbug Johnson, Watts Writers, we never would have been there. Never would have been there. Without Mike Peekaboo Frankie, John Wayne Williams, that it never would have been there. Here's one that was missing in this. We mentioned Robot several times. Without Charles Robot on the West Coast, and I don't want a controversy dealing with where Robot came from because there's great people. We didn't mention the Northern California contribution. I mentioned strutting and dime stopping and those sort of things, but there's a Northern California contribution to popping and boogaloo. That story needs to be told. It's being told right now. So there are a lot of things that weren't really addressed, but Ricky did an outstanding job. And I was glad to put my input and my 2 cents into it. Hey, and I'll see you on the corner of 103rd and Central Avenue in Watts one day telling the real story. Do you feel that you're a hip-hop scheme? My roots are in funk and soul, just as Damon Frost said. I am proud to have been an inspiration to the core of hip-hop. The way I tell it is that there was a message coming out of the civil rights era that was exhibited and put on national exposure through Soul Train. And the message of all of that social party music and all of those things was getting down in the term funk and soul hadn't even been created. There was funk and there was soul, but that was the dance street style movement of my era and my time. Whacking had its era in the gay community and it consolidated with locking and through Shabba-Doo. Shabba-Doo combined both of those. And it put out the message on the West Coast. Well, they suppressed the message on the West Coast. What they did with the message on the West Coast is once it became commercialized with movies like Saturday Night Fever and those type of things, it gave the credit to the dance styles to those actors. Those actors became famous dancers. John Travolta became a famous dancer. And there's a story about him coming into the inner city to learn also. They gave the credit to that and it changed the name to disco. And disco became just about continuous dance, sex, drugs, rock and roll. But the West Coast brothers and sisters didn't let it die. They didn't let it die. When they seen what was going on in the streets of New York and in Brooklyn and the Bronx, they put together the street message again. And they combined locking and popping and robot. And they combined those things in with the b-boy movement and the dance of breaking. They combined the sounds in. When they start putting samples in, what were they sampling? There wasn't hip-hop music at that time. They were sampling music to make hip-hop music. They were sampling funk and soul music. James Brown is one of the people mentioned was the most powerful influence, the most sampled music around the world. So hip hop embraced me and I embraced the message of hip hop. So if we're telling the story together, then yes, I am hip hop now from the funk and soul origin. Hey, I appreciate your question. I wish you'd have logged in so I could have gave you props on the question. You cannot teach feeling. You have to have lived it. Static movements can be taught, but it's sterile feeling. You just can't teach that. That's the dance of the streets. You're absolutely right. I can teach the styles. I can't teach the movement. I can't teach the culture. I can show the culture and teach the culture, and dancers can identify with the culture, which makes them be able to feel funk and soul. But it can only be taught through people that have lived it and can exhibit that feeling seriously. It can't be taught by the ego that wants to change the message of history to its own message. So I agree with the writer. I don't believe you have to have lived it physically. You have to live it internally when it's taught to you. You have to understand the message of oppression. You have to understand the message of the streets. You have to understand how it took place. I think that's where we're trying to go now. If you're going to do the style and claim you represent the culture, then learn to understand the culture. Otherwise, you're just doing the style. You're just doing what's been done in this world for centuries. You're taking other people's culture and benefiting from it, and you're leaving their message pushed aside. Thanks a lot for that, man. Thanks a lot. Good post. Hey, that's a good one. For me personally, no drums, no feeling, just my opinion. Hey, I think you got a valid opinion because when you go into the history, it's the rhythm of the drums. The rhythm of the drums in Africa sent messages from village to village that danger was coming. It kept the message in the tribes of telling the stories from past generations. The rhythm of the drum also freed slaves in slavery time. You had to know where the sound of the drum went. Just like in Capoeira, where they disguised their martial arts as a dance, the message of how to escape by the North Star was hidden in the message of the drums. So see, there's a culture that has a passion to it. So I understand it. It's that drum and that's that deep bass beat, that slap bass beat that sometimes, it could be new music, but the soul of the music is still in those things. So I agree with you, man. I can't feel it. I dance to jazz too because it is improvisational and it has all of those elements in it too. There's some funk jazz. So that's the element that I agree with you. Thanks, man. Thanks, my brother, for that question right there. I really appreciate it. Do I think popping and locking will make a comeback? I don't want that era to die. Look, man, hey, you're touching me deep now because I am now 67 years old. I've been doing this for now 51 years. It's never died. There are different scenes that exist on. And the scene that is the most powerful now, I call the new underground scene, where there's new workshops and this new around the world competitiveness in battles in these events. There are millions of dollars being put in by even people outside of the culture to do that. That's where we're talking about it surviving and making it. And I agree with you. I would love to see it survive and make it in that genre. But don't forget, there are schools now that are teaching the cultural background of some of these dances. Tap has never died. No, it's not done in hip hop events, but it's never died. The cultural art form of locking and its impact on society should never die. And as long as that exists, there's going to be people that try to exhibit it, popping and locking and roboting. So if you wanted to survive in the new school areas, then we got to get out and push it. And it has to be real street. See, this happened too. The media got into locking and the costumes got elaborate and crazy and people thought we were wearing those on the street, which we weren't. There was elements of it that was from the streets, but we weren't. We weren't clowns or clownish or minstrel. We weren't. And they convinced the young generation that that's what street was in the locking era. So what did the young generation do? They took that to real street events. They took that out there into the competitions, and they clowned and they minstreled and they embarrassed the real street scene of locking. They embarrassed it. And when they no longer was wanted inside of those events, then they came to OGs like me that had a passion from the streets. And they said, well, OG, what's this street thing? And I told them there was a whole history that was lost, a whole street era that was lost in the parks and at Watt Stacks. All of that was lost. So putting that street back into locking, into popping, putting that era back in, letting the entertainment world have its version, but explaining every chance we get where it came from, I think that's important for the survival. And that's why my whole thing is educate before you recreate and preserving the culture. If you want to get with me on that, get with me on that. But that's where I think you're absolutely right. Do I think popping and locking will make a comeback? It never left. Peace to you, brother. Thanks for that, man. Thanks for being here. Peace. What else, y'all? Anything else? You always can find me. I'm going to try to do this again. I'm going to see if Ricky will allow me to do it one more time. I'm going to have to take it off because it's exclusively under the Fuse production, and I got him to let me put it on there. I'm going to see if he'll let me put it on here again. It may run for a few hours, so if you want to go back and look at some things or tell your partners or whatever to take a look at it, you will. I don't know, maybe 12 hours or so, it might be able to run. But I'm going to try to do this again. Hey, and you know, we got a certain amount of dedicated people on here. You want this to grow. Just like the last person said, you want it to grow. Then why aren't there more people on here? Why aren't you putting your people out to come join us? Why aren't you telling people around the world that there's another area to this thing? We should have 100 people on here easily. It's no doubt. There are thousands around the world, and there are thousands that would hide this kind of information from them. So get out and get down. I appreciate each and every one of you for taking this time on a Saturday morning, wherever you're at. It might be Friday, wherever you're at. I appreciate that. I'm going to do a thing, some different things pretty soon. I love you all, and I'm going to tell you this before I get out of here. Educate before you recreate. That's what makes these dance powerful. That's what excites people, to be doing the real. Not the fake. Love y'all. I'm OG Skeeter Rabbit, James Higgins, but the original OG Skeeter Rabbit. Peace to you. I love y'all, and I'm out.